We're at the 25th CROI. We're here in Boston. We're here with Elisabeth, who has done was honored to be able to do the Ngali Man lecture.
Yes.
And we really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. And it's always a pleasure to interview the people who are honored with that award and that lecture, because
Thank you very much.
It's always a great person, or in one case, I think it was two people. They stood at two different podiums. They talked back and forth.
I suspect that would probably have been Salim and Quraish Abdul Karim from South Africa.
Yes, it was.
Yes, they're a very dynamic couple.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
But we're interested in knowing about you, and you obviously did a lot of things. I think the one thing that I remembered from the talk was this gumption to get up the mountain, to get through the thing, to pull people along behind you.
Yes.
And I think that's what got you where you're at. You have to have that fortitude. What drives you?
What drives me? It's a very good question. What drives me is the need to make a difference. And I did tell the story yesterday about how I started working in the field of HIV and recognizing, initially as a young medical officer, I didn't tell this one yesterday, but I worked at the border town of Kenya and Uganda. And those days we didn't have rapid tests. We asked people to donate blood, we tested the blood, and thereafter we discarded what we couldn't use. Busia has a lot of malaria, so we had many children who would come in, very anemic, literally dying. And we'd ask their parents to donate blood. And I noted that in the 2 years I was there, initially we would discard maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 pints. But by the time I was there for 2 years, we're discarding 5 or 6 pints out of every 10 that we drew, because their parents were HIV positive. And so I noted the just devastation that HIV was causing. Recognizing we didn't have a cure, many of these children would be left as orphans if they themselves were not infected with the virus. And then coming to the place where I started to work in research myself, in the early years when we told someone they were HIV positive, it was a death sentence. We had nothing to offer them except home-based care. That was in around 1994, 1995. And at that point in time, what we called home-based care was really a dignified way to allow people to die in peace. And people were so afraid. There was so much stigma.
I remember they'd say that people would go off into the bush or whatever and die.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily bush, because people would still value family members, but there was nothing we could do for them in the hospital. You couldn't keep them on intravenous fluids.
So it was palliative care.
It was palliative care, and the family members nursed them as best they could. Of course, also worried that they might get infected in the process. And it was a very, very painful way to watch someone waste away and eventually die. And a young woman I met who was called Susan, who died because there was nothing we could do for her, really made me recognize that we needed to do something to give hope, and we needed to do something to help people who are HIV positive stay alive, find treatment. But we also needed to find ways of being able to prevent people from getting HIV. And the ways that we had then were just not enough. It didn't work for everybody. We needed to find more options. And that has been the driving force. We haven't found a cure. We don't have a vaccine. We are able to treat, so we've made good progress. But we still are not preventing the new infections, especially among the young. So that's what drives me. I've been privileged. I've had the opportunity to be educated even here in the US at the University of Washington, where I did my master's in public health and my PhD in epidemiology. So I feel that I have been given so much, and I need to give back. Right. I need to make a difference for those who are not as privileged as I am.
Right. There's so many wonderful things that have happened over the years to at least get some people treated. And we had so many dynamic efforts. I know when I first started these interviews with Kevin DeCock years ago from Kenya, he said, we'd talk about bleakness of the epidemic and the infrastructure and all kinds of things. And then we said, there was the early days where they said, well, how can people be treated in Africa? They can't tell when to take. That was when we had every 8 hours pill. They couldn't have a watch to tell. I said, no, that's not good enough. That's an excuse. That's not a reason. So we every year we talked with him, and there was always more promise, more hope. And now we're at the point where it's almost unconscionable that we shouldn't be treating everyone, because treatment is prevention.
Not only is treatment is prevention, the question is when you start treatment. If you think about it, there are no other diseases where you diagnose someone and say, you know what, let's wait until you're really sick and then we'll start you on treatment. So it was a decision
that was in the United States for years.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's very sad that that decision was probably based more on economics that were not very sound, because it costs you more to treat a really sick person than it would cost you to treat someone who's not that sick. And when you keep somebody well, it means they can continue to be economically productive, they can support their families, they can contribute to the well-being not just of themselves and their families, but of the community they live in. So it was very sad that we made decisions that were not based really on facts. And that is an important thing that we need to continue doing. Use evidence to make decisions. Make decisions based on sound facts that have been well researched and that have clear backing for why we're doing what we're doing.
What we were doing for so many years was illogical. This is so logical to move forward in treating everyone that presents. And we don't have half the people in our country, in the United States, treated. That's pathetic.
It is very sad.
So I don't know why we keep on working at it. We all come together at these conferences, and there's so many social justice issues, cultural issues. We don't need more reasons why not to treat. We need more reasons that people should be treated.
Very true. And I think that's true not just of HIV and other viral infections, it's true of many things in the world. That there are things that we know work and things that we know can make a difference. But I don't know what it is that we have such apathy towards doing things that we know can work and work well.
And yet
we don't do them.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your energy. I hope that I know that you're doing fabulous work over there in Africa and so many places that are, around the world that are needful. The Eastern Europe, Asia. It's not just Africa either. And even in our country, like I said, half the people aren't treated. This is crazy.
You're very right. And I would say just the same thing you said about climbing the mountain. The reason it's so important and the reason I take my teams up the mountain is because it teaches you that you can't quit.
Right.
It's that willpower, that push, that going the extra step when you just want to stop and sleep, that pushing beyond what you think you can do. And it requires team effort. That's why we need a community to make a difference. Because when I feel like giving up, you tell me, don't quit. You can take another step. And then tomorrow, when you want to quit, I say, no, don't quit. One more step, Fred. And as we keep going, we're able to get to the top of that mountain.
It's amazing. You're amazing.
Thank you. The work that you're doing is amazing. And thank you for the opportunity to chat with you for a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.